This is my red steel full suspension bike, and I thought it would be fun today on this rainy, gloomy Friday to just sort of nerd out about it a little bit, because I used to do it all the time with my old 90s builds that I modernized. I haven't really done it with any of the new stuff that's in here yet, so this will be another special edition full-length episode.
Welcome to Gear Gab.
All right, right off the rip, this is a custom frame. I had this built, and I had it built to my exact specifications and my desired shape. I wanted it to come out this way. And the company that made it is called Merino. They're out of Peru. I am not associated with Merino in any way, shape, or form. I'm not sponsored. He doesn't know who I am. I paid full price to get this made. I didn't get any special treatment because I make YouTube videos, and I don't have to say anything about that. That out of the way, let's talk numbers. At the head tube here, we've got what I consider to be the Goldilocks of head tube angles, 65 degrees. Not too steep, not too slack. The reach from the center of the head tube right to the middle of the bottom bracket, from here to here, that's 475 millimeters. And that nicely brings us to the effective seat tube length, 400 millimeters. Nice and short. One of the more difficult decisions I had to make on this was just how much bottom bracket drop I wanted to have on this. I ended up going with 30 millimeters of bottom bracket drop. We'll talk about that decision a little bit more a little later on, but for now, this thing also has 35 millimeters of bottom bracket offset, meaning instead of it being directly in line with the seat tube, it's 35 millimeters back. And because I've got that 35 millimeters of bottom bracket offset back, it allows for the 425 millimeter chainstay length, which is sort of a hard thing to do with a bike that, well, it was initially designed around 29-inch wheels, but there was always the thought that I'd be fucking with this thing constantly, which is exactly what I do. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I actually don't really know what the stack number is on this. I could look it up, but it's not a number that I think about all that much on a lot of bikes. But suspension travel numbers were initially 140 millimeters of travel in the front and 130 in the rear. A trail bike by most definitions. And right now I've got it sitting here with 160 millimeters of travel in the front, still 130 in the rear. You can't really change that, but it's got 650B wheels on instead of the 29ers it originally had. Same frame, two pretty different builds. And it's kind of that ability to have two bikes being built into one frame that was one of the reasons that I landed on some of the geometry numbers on this. There's actually two reasons. And neither of those reasons was optimal, quick, amazing performance. I don't really care about that. Reason number one has to do with the seat tube length. I wanted about the shortest viable seat tube length for this bike that I could get, along with ensuring this seat tube top tube gusset goes in so that the top tube would come down to about as low as viably possible, because when I was designing this frame, my dream was to learn no-foot cans on my dirt jumper and BMX and bring them over to this, which I've kind of been doing. So, reason one, check. And the rest of the numbers, barring reach, that was just for my bike fit myself, but the rest of the numbers, angles, bottom bracket job, all that, I wanted it to all just be like a kind of a neutral spot in between where a lot of 29er builds were where a lot of 650B builds were. Like, you know, 30 millimeters of bottom bracket drop on a 29er bike's pretty normal to see, but it's not so low that when you put two 650B wheels on, the 18 millimeters of overall lowering on the bike doesn't render it completely useless. It's still pretty good when it's built like this. I like it. Complementing that not too unbelievably low 30 millimeter bottom bracket drop is this 65-degree head tube angle. Say I wanted to just kind of over fork this thing a little bit. The bottom bracket's not too high that when you raise the front end, it feels too weird and annoying. There's some room there to come up in the bottom bracket if you decided to put some more fork on here. I like that. Maybe one day I'll want to try like a 170 on this. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? The whole point is that I can. The way I see it, for the way I ride, where I'm not as worried about optimal performance, more so about getting to fuck around a little bit. These numbers allow for an acceptable riding bike if you want to raise the front end with more fork, or you want to lower the bike overall with smaller wheels. It was a game of compromise coming up with the numbers for this thing, and I gotta say, for how much fun I have with it as a trail bike with 29-inch wheels on it, and this, the way it's built as a sloped duro thing with a 160 millimeter 650B fork on it, I can kind of win it. I actually found myself curious while shooting this what the resulting bottom bracket height from the ground, like what the clearance is from the ground with the 650B swap on here was. It's 340 millimeters from the center of the bottom bracket spindle to the ground, which is actually the same stated bottom bracket height, at least in the geometry chart, of a Marin Rift Zone 27.5 wheel size bike. And sort of surprisingly, but maybe not so much because they are crazy low bikes, an S-Works Stump Jumper 29er. Same bottom bracket height. So even with the smaller wheels on from what it was designed around, the bottom bracket height isn't too wacky. It's not out of the realm of what bikes offered on the market are, which sort of explains why it was sort of better than I expected, like less pedal strikes than I expected, pretty good pedaler when we took it out in this configuration to Macintosh run, and just kind of ripped around. Good compromises all around. Now, let's go over the current parts that are on the build right now, though it'll probably change in the next couple of months. We'll just have to do this again, but for now, this is what it is. The fork is a previous generation RockShox Yari, 27.5 wheel size, 160 millimeters of travel. And I love these forks. I love the Yari. I love the Revelation. It's one step down from the top. They're 80% as good as what the top ones are. And people are really quick to take these off their bikes to upgrade to the top level stuff that you can usually find these for like a pretty good price. The way I see it, I'm 10% the rider that Remy Métayer is. If I can ride something that's 80% as good as the stuff that he rides for a third of the price of any of that stuff new because I buy it from people used on the internet, that all works out pretty good. I'm running a Marizaki Bomber CR coil with a Cane Creek progressive spring on it. I was sort of sold on these because of the price, and every review said they were way better. They punch way above their weight. They last a really long time between service intervals, and everyone basically said you should just have one of these as your spare. It'll get you out of a jam always if your more expensive stuff breaks, and that to me was like, oh, I'll just have one of these. Like, I'll just have one of these. So the suspension on this thing's pretty sorted. I'm really happy with it. I don't really touch anything on it. I just ride it. It has traction. It feels good. Good enough. The wheels are a set of Hunt Trail Wide 650B size, of course. The rear is not Boost because I originally bought this wheel set for the Felt when we were working on it, swapping it to 650B. So I'm running it in here with adapters. That's fine, whatever. I'm running a Panaracer Romero 2.6 in the front and a Maxxis Assegai in the rear. It's just an old tire that I had sitting around. I have this thing set up single speed with a 28 tooth chainring on a set of Truvitiv Dissident cranks, 170 millimeters long. The rear cog is just some cheapy 16 tooth. And I've got the Reverse Components SB1 Collab chain tensioner, which has been pretty good. You just have to make sure you run enough wrap on it so that the chain doesn't skip. And I've actually said in videos in the past that this bike is designed for a 28 tooth chainring, and typically some idiot will be like, put a bigger chainring on so you can pedal better. Why would this bike be designed to pedal with a 28 tooth? And I guess maybe I'm not clear enough, but literally the bike is designed clearance-wise for a 28 tooth. Nothing to do with pedal efficiencies. It's amazing how often someone tries to correct me on something that is mine. So that's why 28 tooth. I'd run something a little bigger if it would fit, but it does rub if you run a bigger one on, especially with the way some of the steel will flex. I have a Tidal mountain bike gyro rear brake set up to a TRP Hyro rear caliper. So cable pull hydraulic actuated rear caliper. I have this set up because I wanted to do bar spins on trails and in the bike park, but I'm not completely sold that these brakes work well enough. It was cool to go to a trail and do it, but I think I am gonna maybe run 2 hydraulic brakes here pretty soon and just wrap the rear brake hose around the head tube like I do on my dirt jumper. And yes, eventually drill the hole to route that front brake hose through the steer of the fork. And that way I could do like 2 bar spins in a run if, you know, I feel like it. I'm using the stock bar uncut from a Poseidon Norton, and it is clamped in a Cintas Megaforce stem, 30 millimeters long. The seat post is no name, and the saddle is a physique set. It just kind of matched the bike pretty good, so looks kind of cool. But I'm gonna change it out for a pivotal seat post here pretty soon. And that is it. That's my red bike. That's why it has the geometry that it has. And those are the parts that are currently on it. So I think this was probably another 11, 12 minute long drawn out video about a bike of mine. I apologize for that. But thanks for checking out this episode of Gear Gab. Subscribe for more. If I was a more intelligent YouTuber, I would have affiliate linked a bunch of these parts and tried to sell you something. I didn't do that. So if you like, it would be really great if you'd subscribe or check out the merch site.